There's frameworks now that raise money. They raise a lot of money, like they raise 50 million. And the idea is that you need to make the developers, the new developers, get them to use this framework. It is open source, but you probably should use the platform, which is paid.
You know, I didn't expect to see Levels talking crap on the PHP world. Certainly not Laravel, but I guess he has those things to say because Laravel just raised $57 million to support the building of their new platform. I am honestly a bit surprised by this announcement. It was my understanding that the Laravel world was self-funded and making a lot of money, you know, Lambos and whatnot. And as far as I know, they still are. Like, they're doing fine. But Taylor's ambitions are to go further. And with those ambitions, he has decided to raise money through Vercel, which is one of the leading companies and VC groups investing in open source world stuff and general future of tech platform stuff. They're also a big investor in Vercel. So makes sense. I know we've been making the memes for a while that like Laravel is building Vercel, but for PHP, but this is real now. It happened. And I wanted to take some time to talk a bit about it because I'm surprised that this isn't getting more attention than I expected. Obviously, 4K likes is a big number and all, but this marks a huge shift in a way that I haven't seen in a while. To understand this, I want to go through a bit of my history with how I ended up on Vercel and how Vercel started to exist, and then dig into what this means for Laravel. This video is not sponsored by Vercel. It does have a sponsor though. Thank you, Raid Shadow Legends. It's me. So if you do want to sponsor videos like this and take advantage of the opportunity to reach this awesome audience, hit us up at youtube@t3.gg. So in case some of y'all weren't familiar with Laravel already, it's the PHP framework for web artisans. In less pretentious speak, it's the best way to ship PHP in modern times. The ecosystem is admittedly nuts. They have plugins and packages for basically everything you'd ever want to do. It's a really solid all-in-one solution, especially with stuff like Livewire, which is a way to update the page from the PHP code without having to write custom JavaScript, or Inertia, if you recognize that client-side JavaScript's actually very powerful. It's a great framework, and I see why people like it so much and why there's a growing community around it, despite the three-letter word that scares me and many others quite a bit. So what's going on? Why are they raising money? Well, they've already had other products like Forge and Vapor that are both products for managing, deploying, and scaling your Laravel applications. But it seems like Laravel Cloud is a step forward where they're going even further. As they say in the announcement here, the future of Laravel is more than just features. It's redefining how we think about building applications. We believe Laravel is the most productive way to create full-stack web apps, and the Laravel community deserves a world-class experience for shipping, scaling, and securing those applications. 10 years ago, Forge changed the game. 5 years later, Vapor pushed the boundaries with serverless deployments. Now we're aiming higher than we've ever aimed before. We've spent more than a decade listening to what developers want, and it's simple. They just want to ship. I'm gonna do a thing. The future of Next is more than just features. It's redefining how we think about building apps. We believe Next is the most productive way to create full-stack web applications, and the Next.js community deserves a world-class experience for shipping, scaling, and securing those applications. A decade ago, Vercel, then Zeit, changed the game with Now. 5 years later, we pushed the boundaries of serverless deployments and edge computing. Now we're aiming higher than we've ever aimed before. We spent years listening to what developers want, and it's simple. They just want to ship. Notice something. I really hope that the PHP world can stop shitting on the JavaScript world because we've been pretty good. I have went out of my way to not be super anti-PHP, especially once I heard about Inertia. Because again, like Inertia is such a great representation of understanding your strengths and weaknesses. And it's been awesome seeing things like when Taylor Ortwell was on the Dax and Adam podcast, I forgot the name of it, but he was on their podcast and specifically said that like he has issues with the way that DHH presents things because he pretends that no client-side JavaScript is necessary, and Inertia lets you do the right thing when you need to build it. And he was frustrated that someone else who was on the same side as him could be as wrong as they are. But yeah, this is a great example of why I do dig what Laravel is doing, because they recognize that they're not the best way to build UIs and interactive experiences. And instead of pretending, they make it easy to pass props from the server to the client. And now you can just write client-side view, React, whatever you want, and have access to the props that you got from the server. Really cool stuff. And if you're wanting to build a scalable service with everything included, but still use the traditional client-side JavaScript you know and love, it's a really good solution. Also, the podcast is called Tomorrow FM. Thank you, guys. When you read this and compare it to things like what DHH has been saying recently, it's quite funny. No more wasting time on DevOps, or that's a made-up word, minutia, I know, but what? That makes it feel AI written. No more tinkering with server configuration files, load balancers, or database backups. No more headaches. With Laravel Cloud, this is no longer a dream, it's a reality. It's a fully managed infrastructure platform built for developers and teams who just want to ship their next big idea, and it's relentlessly optimized for Laravel and PHP. With Laravel Cloud, you're not just deploying code, you're embracing a future where infrastructure works for you, not the other way around. Auto-scaling, done. DDoS protection, standard. Push to deploy, of course. Databases, Laravel serverless Postgres scales your database on demand, all while you only pay for what you use. It's not just another tool, it's a new standard. You can see why they raised VC money. This is one of the most VC-esque things I've ever read. And when this came out, which by the way, the one actually kind of sketchy thing I didn't love about how they did this rollout was that they had Laracon, like the Laravel conference. They had a bunch of influencers there. They made it a big event. They announced Laravel Cloud, but they didn't say until afterwards that the money that funded all of that came from a VC. That felt a bit weird to me. It's not a big deal, especially because I expected VC to happen at some point for them. It just only made sense with the things they were trying to build. But it did feel almost a bit like they were hiding it at the event and then revealed it afterwards because they were scared of the pushback they would get at Laracon if they announced it there. Because remember, this is the PHP community. They've been complaining about venture capital funded stuff for so long. If we want to talk about a framework that was open source, that built a lot of positive sentiment, that then became a business that sold services to make it easier to deploy their stuff and raised venture capital money in order to do it, this fits that bill more than Vercel did. The history with Vercel, which I probably should have brought up before, is a little bit more interesting in my opinion, where Next didn't start because they had this grand vision for the future. Next started because building React apps was harder than it should be, and it was missing a couple pieces, even if you use things like Create React App. Managing your Webpack config was miserable. That was the main reason Next started. The other thing was the ability to static generate parts of your pages so that you didn't have the same empty HTML template for every route in order to make things like SEO better. But Next was built to generate dynamically the different pages that you have for your website, handle all of the Webpack stuff for you, and let you just write React the way you were used to. Once they had all of that done, they realized that deploying your React apps was harder than expected, especially if you now had a server-side dependency on it. So they created what was called Zeit and Zeit's Now product, which was a Docker image deployment platform. Then they got serverless pilled. And with that, they went all in and in the direction that now has become Vercel. But if you watched as it happened, all of these steps made sense. They tried to make managing your React app easier and get SEO working with Next as a way to solve that problem. And by the way, Guillermo Roche, who created that, also created Socket.io. Socket.io was the standard for WebSocket stuff because it worked even without WebSockets, which was nuts. So Socket.io is like how we handled events and event management in our applications for so long. Somebody in chat's already saying they still use it in prod. Many are. Many are still using Socket.io in prod. It's like the standard and it's really good. And all of the alternatives try to be Socket.io compatible because of how good it is. So yeah, this was also created by Guillermo Roche before Next.js. His goal was always to solve problems that made building modern web apps harder. And deployment was one of them, which is why he created Zeit and Now, the Docker image deployment thing that was more competing with like, I don't know, a DigitalOcean type product. And then went all in on serverless stuff and became the Vercel we now know and like to shit on. So when you follow that history, you realize, oh, that lines up almost perfectly with what we're seeing with Laravel Cloud here. Very similar. Very similar. The difference being like the specific problems were a bit more specific on the Vercel side, where Laravel's more, we're going to solve all the things, but both are taking a very similar path and ending up in a very similar place. And the main reason I want to talk about this is that it feels weird that people have been complaining about things like the Vercel team and the Vercel company raising a bunch of money and paying influencers to talk about them and all that shit, when the literal exact same thing is happening over in PHP land. I don't think it's bad in either case, but the people who think it's bad in one case and not the other, they're delusional. And that's the thing I wanted to point out here. It's awesome to see more great frameworks and products and teams getting the funding they need to potentially change how we build software forever. I love that. I am genuinely excited by this announcement. That doesn't mean I'm not going to tool on the people a little bit who are pretending that this is okay, but what Vercel did isn't. And if any of y'all have a good justification for that, why you think Vercel is evil and Laravel is good despite doing the exact same thing here, let me know. I'm genuinely curious. But it just screams contradiction to me that the community that has been the most annoying about the VC money affecting the direction of open source stuff is now going in this direction too. And to be fair to Taylor, He has always been great about these things. I've never seen him as particularly problematic about any of this. I've actually been very impressed with Taylor. Every conversation we've had and every interview I've seen with him, every comment I've seen him make about things, I'm weirdly well aligned with. I find him someone who actually really fucking gets it in this industry. He's like, if you tone back DHH's brain rot, like most of the way down to nothing, and all of that reserved brain power that you just got back up put into actually shipping. Yeah. Taylor's great. I like him a lot. That's my take on this. I'm actually quite excited to see where they go. It's cool seeing Excel not just investing in the JavaScript world, but diversifying and making sure all these ecosystems have the same potential. But to do one more counterpoint, I started using Vercel before I ever used Next.js because it was the easiest way to deploy JavaScript-based web apps. That was a huge thing for me. And I don't necessarily see that with what they're building with Laravel Cloud. Like I cannot imagine many, if any, Laravel Cloud users using it without using Laravel, the framework, which is interesting. But we'll see where that goes because I could be entirely wrong. Here's what you guys think. Is Laravel evil now, or was everyone overreacting about the VC stuff in the first place? I'm hyped about this. I see a really bright future for all of these products and all of this infrastructure. And in the end, if what the result is people able to ship what they're trying to ship faster, I'm cool with that. Until next time, peace nerds.